Welcome to our program. So let me start from this. Okay, this is interesting actually. For an American academician, you wrote a book on a movement which is rooted in Islam and in Turkey. Okay, so what was the motive behind that leads you to write this book?
Well, I teach the sociology of comparative religions at the University of Houston. And in fact, I was in the classroom teaching when the plane hit the World Trade Building on 9/11.
Okay.
And for those days after 9/11, many people were introduced to Islam. People who had hardly heard of the religion before. And everything was Islam and terrorism, Islam and violence, Islam and an attack on America.
Okay.
And I was very concerned to hear what we call the moderate or the nonviolent, the peaceful Muslim voice protesting those actions. And on September 21st, I saw a one-page statement in the Washington Post protesting the 9/11 events and talking about Islam as a peaceful movement, peaceful religion, signed by M. Fethullah Gulen, imam and scholar, and it caught my attention. And then a few years later, I began getting graduate students from Turkey, some of whom were involved in this movement.
Okay.
And several of them wanted to write theses on the movement. So I became acquainted with the movement. And then I made my first interfaith dialogue trip to Turkey in 2006. And I visited many of the schools and Sema Hospital and Samanyolu TV and Zaman newspaper. And I became very fascinated with the movements.
Okay. According to you, what makes this phenomenon as a social movement? Is it a social movement?
I think it's a social movement because it involves large numbers of people gathered together around very central issues and trying to achieve change in society.
Okay.
So it's a social movement in my estimation, and I call it a civil social movement.
Okay.
Because not only is it religious, but it's also trying to do good things in the society and improve societies.
Okay. How could you draw the line between religious and the civic? For you, it is a civic movement, yes?
I call it a civic movement rooted in Islam. It's definitely religious in its roots.
Okay.
But it's not just a religious movement to promote Islam or to proselytize, to gain converts.
Okay.
At the heart of this movement is wanting to educate young people, wanting to do good works in the society, and make society and humankind a better place to live.
Okay.
So in that sense, I think it's a civic movement.
Okay.
Unlike many religious movements whose sole purpose is to promote the faith and to proselytize the faith.
Okay. For you, this is something original, isn't it? It's rooted in a religious background, if you like, but it is a mainly civic movement.
Well, it's not the only one of its kind in the world.
Okay.
There are other similar movements historically.
Okay.
I think one of the things that makes the Gulen movement very unique is its non-hierarchical, non-bureaucratic structure.
Okay.
I think that's a very important characteristic of the movement.
Okay.
It's very difficult to know how many members there are or to count the number of schools because there are no central statistics. There's no president of the movement.
This is something positive, isn't it, according to your opinion?
I think it makes the movement very powerful. In this sense, the operating agenda of the movement is to move into a local area, perhaps a businessman or a student, and then to see what the needs of that local area might be, and then to organize the local people to define those needs and to do something about it. So the local people feel like this is their project.
All right.
tremendous commitment to these projects because they
Okay.
belong to the local people.
Okay.
So I think that's one of the things that generates such commitment to the movement and to the projects of the
Okay.
movement.
The one important concept is the commitment. Yes, you underline in your book again. So how can you interpret this? Why people in the movement so committed to do the project, to achieve something?
I think part of it is rooted in Turkish history.
Okay.
This notion of hospitality and taking care of one's neighbor and doing good for the society. Turkish people are so hospitable. That
Thank you.
impresses a
Thank
lot of
you.
us who come to Turkey. And when Mr. Gulen began preaching in the late 60s and 70s, at first I thought he's introducing totally new ideas. But he wasn't. He was drawing upon a very rich Ottoman past
Okay.
and upon ideas that the Turkish people were very familiar with.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is the commitment is definitely rooted in Islam.
All right.
People are giving to the movement, not only money, but time and energy, because they see this as their religious duty. They talk
Okay.
about things like, sadaqah and this whole system of vakifs
Okay.
and setting up good works in the society. So those kind of concepts are very, very important to the commitment dynamic, but also the sense of fellowship
All right.
and the sense of joining with other people to do good. In my estimation, the pulse of the movement,
Okay.
at the heart of the movement,
Okay.
at least structurally, is this notion of the sohbet. People gathering together once or twice a week with fellow members, discussing ideas of Mr. Gulen, discussing interpretations of the Quran, getting to know one another, learning one another's needs, and then learning what kind of projects need
Okay.
volunteers and funding. And throughout all of my interviewing, this notion of the sohbet was so powerful.
Okay. Have you been to one of the sohbet?
Yes, I have, to one or two,
Okay.
and they're amazing. This sense of brotherhood is amazing.
Okay.
I interviewed a group of businessmen in Bursa that had just returned from Darfur,
Okay.
and they promised to rebuild a village in Darfur within 2 years, and I think they're going to do it. But one of the gentlemen said to me, I now have brothers in Darfur and all over the world. And he said, it's so wonderful to be able to go to a sohbet and share with people basic ideas.
But as far as I see something new in this movement. For instance, Islam, Islamic history, Turkish culture, Ottoman history, and Islamic tenets and doctrines, and the traditions as an intellectual tradition was there. I mean, so something happened and it became available for a civic movement. I think the role of the Fethullah Gulen Hoca Efendi to make this available for the modern world. Is it?
I think one of the unique things that happened when Mr. Gulen began preaching is his notion that we must educate the young people. This was a time in Turkish history when there was a lot of fear of communism and leftist movements, and he was very concerned about the youth. But what was unique is he kept saying we need to educate the youth, but not only in religion, but also in science and technology. And his point was that one can enter the modern world and be educated in the modern world and still be a good Muslim.
Okay.
And I think that's what caught the attention of a lot of people at that time in Turkish history.
Okay. Let me return your book. Do you have some one-stroke thesis in your book? What is your main thesis in the book?
Well, I have two. I would say I have two basic research questions that I started with.
Okay.
When I came to Turkey and saw all these wonderful schools and the hospitals and the newspaper and all that was going on in this movement, everything's so first class. It's done so well.
Okay.
And I realized it takes money to do that.
All right.
And one of my first questions was, where's the money coming from? And of course, this was also the time when a lot of the critics of the movement and even people that were becoming familiar with the movement were saying, surely there's some government support. Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it Iran? Is it the American CIA? Where's the money behind all this?
Okay.
So that was a first question. And then a second question was this commitment. What is generating this kind of enthusiasm and commitment on the part of millions of people? So those were the two basic questions that I began with.
Okay. So
I actually wanted to write a book just on the finances.
okay.
And when I approached publishers, Oxford University Press, Cambridge, University of Chicago, Rutgers, all the editors said the same thing to me. Dr. Ebaugh, how do you spell that? Gulen. What is that? Who is it? They had never heard of Mr. Gulen.
Okay.
So they all said, we need a book that's more general. We need an introduction of this movement to the Western world. So I had to reformulate the book.
All right.
And present that more general idea of the movement. And it was written primarily for an American and Western audience.
Yes, I understand that.
Very much so.
Very much so. So, are you going to carry on to follow this book with another one?
Probably. What I'm interested in now is tracing the movement as it leaves Turkey and begins to become globalized.
Okay.
I've been to Azerbaijan, I've been to Melbourne, Australia, to Brussels, to Paris. I'm hoping to go to Spain this summer. I want to see what happens to the movement as it globalizes.
Okay.
How does it stay the same? How does it change? How is it going to adapt? Because it's growing rapidly.
Okay.
We estimate now there are about 120 countries that have schools on 5 continents. It's growing very quickly. This is a powerful movement, and I see it becoming even more powerful in the days to come.
It is going to be very interesting, this book, you know, to see the change from continent to continent, probably from country to country. Anyway, let me come to the role of the Hoca Efendi Fethullah Gulen in the movement. I mean, what sort of role he played? He originated and just left it, or is he a charismatic leader of the movement?
He's a charismatic leader in the sense that he inspired the movement in its very beginnings. It was his ideas, his commitment, his enthusiasm, his religious spirit that generated the movement. But unlike a lot of charismatic leaders, what's very interesting about Mr. Gulen is the fact that he doesn't want a lot of recognition for all of this. I thought I would get in trouble with him.